Welcome, everybody. I assume you can hear the sound of my voice. If so, you could signify by waving at me or something. I didn't really mean waving, but you know what I mean. Oh, thank you. People are raising their hands. All right, and as normal, we're going to start. Hey, Jerry and Audrey. Hello, hello, hello. We usually start slow and then, more people join because, we're real estate agents and, right, we're independent contractors. We can show up whenever we want to. Isn't that right? Isn't that why you got your real estate license? So I wanted to talk today about open houses, right? A topic, everybody talks about open houses. Nobody does anything about them. What I wanted to cover was why, how, and what's important. Let me tell you what's in my mind, right? I don't know if you guys read, but recently, Coldwell Banker is involved in a class action lawsuit. This is bad news. The class action group, the group was just recently certified. And the essence of the lawsuit is there's trying to get thousands of people all over the United States to go after Coldwell Banker because Coldwell Banker was allowing their agents to do cold calling, telephone calling. And they were calling people that were on a do not call list. They were using robocalls. They were using voice messaging and stuff like that. And it's not really that this is a Coldwell Banker problem. I spent 7 years at Keller Williams, and we kind of taught people to do the same things, and I spent a much longer time at Century 21, and people were doing the same things. And I happen to know if you're at Intero and Compass, agents that I could tell you that are doing the same thing. Now, every real estate office, every company, major company, has in their policies and procedures something that says don't make calls to people that are on the do not call list. However, as real estate agents, we oftentimes just avoid it. I've heard agents say, well, yeah, I know, I'm just calling them anyhow because, well, I speed too. Don't you sometimes exceed this? I mean, we all violate the law a little bit. Now, I haven't checked recently, but the last time I did, the single instant fine for violating the do not call list was $16,000 right? each time, right? That's how much you could be. And although, and so anyhow, all of the companies have a little clause in their policies and procedures that says you should follow the do not call list. EXP is actually going to be adding in the onboarding process a certification that agents understand what's going on and that they shouldn't be doing this. Now, I get agents say, what about for sale owners and what about expireds? There's a great video from Bay East Association of Realtors from a year or two ago about how expired listings, some people are getting hundreds of phone calls, right? Hundreds of phone calls from real estate agents. They're changing their phone numbers in order to avoid the harassment that they're getting from real estate agents. And I would ask you this question. Do you like it when people call you unsolicited to sell you, like, I don't know, a car warranty, right? Or something like that? Are you happy to hear from those people? I have decent software on my phone that blocks a lot of those calls. Several of them today, they were flagged as being spam. And Audrey doesn't like getting those calls. Most of us don't. Do you like it? So is that really the most effective way to get business, right? Cold calling, right? Calling for sale by owners, calling expired listings, targeting around, the neighborhoods, I don't think so. And we're going to look at some actual numbers. But the other thing that I would point out is the personality style of a telemarketer is not necessarily the personality style of most people that are in real estate and most people that just exist. It is a very specific type of personality style. Most of us would rather have face-to-face conversations with people that show some interest in what we're talking about. And that is why we're talking about open houses. Now, what I'm showing you here is highlights, snippets that I've done from the 2021 National Association of Realtors Profile of Home Buyers and Sellers. I'm sure all of you have your own copy of this. If you're in my coaching program, in my team, or any of those sort of things, there's a complete copy of this in the document library. But it was asking buyers, right? This is for buyers, what information sources they used in their home search. And you can see open house, 41%, right? So 41% of the buyers said that they used it. Oh, can I share my screen? Well, boy, you guys want everything. I was going to charge extra for the screen share. I was going to bid. Thank you for doing that. I need help. So the 2021 Profile of Home Buyers and Sellers, National Association of Realtors. What information sources did they use? I like it that the real estate agent ranked so high, but notice open house, 41%, right? So 41% of the buyers, right, found that was, a useful thing. And when you ask the question, how, this is a really good question. How do buyers find their agent? How does that actually happen? Now, this is a good thing to pay attention to, but 47%, nearly half. And notice it's much higher for first-time buyers, so 10% higher. That's much higher. Was referred to or is a friend, neighbor, or relative. You see that? Right? Almost 60% of first-time buyers, almost 50% of all buyers. They use the agent before. Well, that's generally repeat buyers, right? Because how they have it before. Inquired by a property website, saw information, visited an open house, and met the agent 4% of the time. 4% of the time. Now, what that means is that if you had 100 people go through your open house, there's a chance that 4 of them are going to end up finding an agent by going to open houses. 4 of them. Well, maybe I had to call people. Isn't that better? Look at this. Personal contact by agent. Telephone, email, etc. was only 3% of the time. Only 3% of the time. But you're thinking, I know what you're thinking, but of course, open houses, that's for buyers. When we're calling people on the phone, we're looking for sale by owners, we're looking for expired listings, we're listing focused. We're not buyer focused. So yeah, what about that? All right. So here is the section from the 2021 Profile of Home Buyers and Sellers. And this is for sellers. And it was asking the home sellers, where did you find your agent? And notice again, coming in at the top, referred by or is a friend, neighbor, or relative. First time sellers, almost half, right? Are you working your sphere of influence? Really? Use the agent previously, personal contact, 4% of the time, right? Which would include telephone, but email, whatever. Referred, visited an open house, it was 2% of the time. So yes, it is true that the number of people that find their agent, it's out of 100 people that go to an open house, maybe 2 of them, right, are going to sell their home, find the agent. So you have a better chance. Now, the personal contact is not just a phone. And by the way, it could be a lot of other things, right? Notice direct mail is relatively down there. So we're really mostly focused on buyers, but there's a way of getting sellers. Many of us that have done a lot of open houses have in fact, gotten sellers from the process as well. But I'm just saying, if you're working with buyers, if you're looking for buyers, 4% is better than a lot of the other choices, right, that you might have, right? So there's a handout for those of you that are looking for a handout, right, that I've included on the side. And, and some of this you can read if if you have insomnia. You don't have to have your own listing to do an open house, right? Just thought I would mention that, right? And if you if you don't have listings, right? And some of the material I put together is focused on how to do an open house on your own listing. And by the way, That's way better, right? It's way better to do an open house on your own listing, and some of you have more control, and some of the things are specific to that, but you don't have to have a listing to do an open house. First of all, the company you work for might have listings that you could do an open house with, right? One of the advantages at EXP is that we're one broker, right, with about 11,000 agents. And so you could do an open house for any of them that wanted you to do an open house. But if you have your own listings, well, that's pretty cool, because you could do better. Great agents work at every moment. So what the reason for doing the open house is not to sell the house. I just want to be clear, right? That's not why we're doing the open house. Because if we look, where did the buyer find the house they bought? It's not a high percentage of the time at the open house. Some of them do, but they're not going to say often, that's how I found the home I bought. We're doing the open house not to sell the house, but to meet buyers or sellers or investors that we could work with in the future. Now, if we're not there to sell the house, maybe we shouldn't spend too much time selling the house. So what I mean by that is that, and I'm going to go through a script and what I would recommend that you do when you're at the open house. We're going to get to that relatively quickly. And that's most of the time I want to really spend on what do you actually do before and during the open house. But what we're there to do is, number one, to build rapport, right? Number one, right? There are 4 steps in every set. The first step is you need to build rapport. Hi, how you doing? Number 2, to qualify, and to qualify means we need to uncover issues or problems that person might have, challenges, goals, desires, things like that. We need to qualify and find out, do they need help? Do they want help? In order to, are they interested in buying a house? Number 3, we would then show them that we can do something with them that would help them. We could help them with their goals. We could help them with their problems. And then number 4 is to close. And close means to get a commitment, to make a decision. Let me ask you guys this. I should have made this a poll question, right? And then, put it back on Facebook and Twitter like I do all the times we do polls. Let me ask you this question. Is it a goal of the open house to get the phone number, name, and email address of the people that are attending? Right? How many of you could raise your hand if you want to, how many of you would say that's the goal of an open house? Right? I've seen one yes, I get an I do. That sounds scary. A yes. Anybody? How many, raise your hands, those of you that know how to do the hand raising. How many of you would say that a goal, a primary goal of the open house is to collect names, addresses, and phone numbers? Raise your hand. I can see your hands are all broken, or your fingers for the mouse are all broken. So what I'm going to say may not be what is standard taught, because I'm going to say the goal of the open house is not to get people's phone numbers, email addresses, and names. That's not the goal of the open house. The goal of the open house is to get an appointment. So I don't know if you, and by the way, there was a long time when I didn't use sign-in sheets at open houses. And I'm going to talk about that. I would probably use one now, but how do you feel if you went to something and they asked you to sign in? All right, you walk in and they say, hey, will you please sign in? The owner has asked that, we have a record of everybody who was here, and so if you don't mind, we just sign in. Now, if you've done this as much as I have, and later you look at what people actually wrote, sometimes they write some pretty rude things, right? Like the email address is obviously not a real email address because it contains cuss words in it, you know what I mean? And you understand, why would you want to give somebody your name and your phone number and your email address? Would you want to do that? if you were a typical buyer just out looking around, to a real estate agent? Would you like to do that? Because what's going to happen if you give the real estate agent your phone number? They're going to call you. Is that what's going to happen? That's why they want it, so they can call you. And what if you give them your email address? What's the agent? They're going to spam you, right? And so many times when buyers walk in the door, they're not interested in giving up that information right away. But the goal is to qualify them and demonstrate enough value such that they're willing to take another step and get an appointment. Now, if I get an appointment with somebody, if I've already built rapport and demonstrated value, and they say, yeah, we're willing to talk to you about that, then I would be saying, great, what works better for you? Is it during the week or on weekends? And they say weekends. And I say, great, that works for me too. Saturday or Sunday? And they say Saturday. Oh, wonderful. I prefer Saturdays also. Morning or afternoon? And they say, well, morning is usually better for us on Saturdays. Early morning or late? Well, late morning. How about 11 o'clock? Right? You understand? And then they say, yeah, that sounds good. And so now that I'm putting them into my calendar program, would it be appropriate for me at this point to ask their name? Because I'm putting it in the calendar program. The answer is yes. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be emailing you some information in advance of our meeting, so it'll save a lot of time. What's the best email for you? Right? They're likely to tell me at this point. And let me get your phone number just in case something comes up and we need to reschedule so I can text you and get a hold of you. And then, right, you understand? At that point, you're more likely to get them to be willing to give you their phone number, their email address. If it's another real, how do you let them know how many people showed up? How do you let them know? All right. So thank you for that question, Aubrey. It's a very good question, and it's one of my big issues, right? So let's say you're doing an open house for another real estate agent, right? If you have, let's say you're doing an open house for another real estate agent. Would you like to be able to do more open houses for that real estate, the listing agent? And the answer is probably yes, should be yes. I'll tell you, as a listing agent, the most irritating thing that can happen when you let somebody do an open house. And that is that when the open house is over, they do not tell you what happened. I've had agents do open houses for me, and then they would leave at the end of the open house, go to a movie or something. Their phone is off, disconnected, something. They're not answering it. The seller is calling me saying, what happened with the open house? What did we get today? How many people went through? I'm trying to get the agent who did the open house to tell me, but they are not responding. There have been times when I just made up stuff to tell the seller because they weren't going to let go until they were told the results. And the agent who did the open house was not telling me what happened. By the way, you do that to me, you're not doing any more open houses on my listings. Right? You're not going to do another open house. So what my recommendation is first of all, when you're done with the open house, don't break anything when you're there. You know, how about that? Right? And I'll talk about what to do with agents. I'll do it here. If I'm doing an open house for another agent, or you're doing an open house for me, let me just, as the listing agent, I don't care. I want you to have your own brochures, your own flyers, right? With your name and your contact information on them. What you can do is the brochure box that's outside of the house, you can take out my flyers and put in your flyers for the open house. And then inside where there's a display with my flyers, you can put your flyers, but don't throw mine away because you can only do that during the open house. My business cards you ought to hang on to because you might need them, but you're welcome to put your business cards up. Right, so while you're doing the open house, the trade-off is I don't have to do the open house, which I don't want to, and you're going to have an opportunity to meet potential buyers and sellers. Right, when the open house, before you leave the open house, right, it's 4 o'clock and you're getting ready to go, you ought to text the listing agent what happened. If you were the listing agent, what would you want to know? How many people came, how many groups? Sometimes we say there were 12 groups, 10 groups. Was anybody interested? Did anyone make comments about things they liked or didn't like? Is there feedback that could be useful to the seller? And then be sure you leave the house the way you found the house and lock it up and do all that kind of stuff. Also make sure you put, and yes, thank you, Jerry. And when you're done, put my flyers back, right? Put my business cards back, do all that, right? Just saying, right? So I believe that this would ought to be part of your lead generating system. I believe this. Now, open houses haven't been as effective in the last few years, to the degree that, number one, there was COVID, right? So in 2020, we weren't doing them for a long time. Even now, there are people that might be reluctant, right? Still, right? Number two, because the market, the inventory was so tight and the demand was so high, a lot of times the properties were sold even before the open house. Or we only needed to do one open house because we were going to get multiple offers and it would sell on Tuesday and we only needed to do one open house. So there was less opportunity for agents to do open houses. Inventory is rising, days on market is getting longer, and you're going to see there will be more open house opportunities. And I'll talk about flyers a little bit later, right? I'll show you how to make one. So you ought to set a goal. Look at your calendar. How many weekends would you be willing to do an open house? Saturday, Sunday, both, how many? And by the way, if the property is vacant, it makes it a little bit easier. And if the seller and the listing agent are willing, you can do open houses during the week. Let's say you don't have another job during the day, or your job only involves using the phone or a computer. If you went and did an open house from noon to 2 or noon to 1 on weekdays, or Friday afternoon, right, which is easier on vacant homes, but noon they may be gone and don't care if you do an open house. What's the worst that could happen if you did open houses at noon? What's the worst that could happen? Nobody comes by. That's the worst that could happen. Can you make phone calls from the open house? Can you use your computer at the open house? Can you do the things that you would do if you were sitting in an office or sitting at home? You could do all that. And somebody might walk in. Somebody might walk in. So we're going to, these are some suggestions about creating flyers and coordinating maps. I'm going to show you exactly how to do this easily, right? I have a light version and then I have the heavy version. By the way, if you're farming a geographic area and somebody is interested in selling, this is my opinion, you ought to do everything you can to get the listing. I don't care if it's overpriced, then I don't care if it's under commissioned. You want to get that listing because one of the best advertisements is doing open houses. Every weekend you can put up a whole bunch of signs and people see them and they're coming in and out. And then where was I going with this? And if you're doing that, you would be able to put together, you'll be able to market to other sellers a little more effectively. I'm going to get to that in a moment. Anyhow, here are some suggestions. Now I put together a schedule. Right? There's those of you who like, this sort of thing. I didn't realize I had that big of a space. I don't know. But maybe every Monday you would select an open house. Now, some of the agents that I talk to who, let's say, are prefer particular communities. So maybe the city that you're in or the neighborhood that you're in, when you really think about the demographics, isn't your kind of people as much as maybe another one. So you might want to select an open house and you would run the MLS, you would set up a search so that when somebody from your company has a listing, then you can, somebody has a listing, you could do the open house for them, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit more. Then somebody says, yes, you can do the open house this weekend, start posting, You could call neighbors if you're into that. You could go invite neighbors. I'm going to talk about the 2 open house system when we get to that. Prepare material to take with you. There's a digital folder that I'm going to have an example of, well, at least a list. And you just keep putting up signs. By the way, signs. Right? We'll talk a little bit more about that, but you have several options. One option is you can, I guess, you could use the listing agent signs if the listing agent has them. Now, if you're doing an open house for me and I have signs that aren't being used, I would like you to use them. I have agents that say, oh, I want to use your signs. I've gotten phone calls while somebody else was doing an open house because they saw my sign and my sign has my phone number on it. Just saying, it doesn't happen very often, but it's happened. So one is you could use the listing agent signs. 2, you can get generic open house signs. And you can get them from the Board of Realtors. They might cost $25 to $30. They just are red and have an arrow and it says open house. 3, you could have signs that are custom made. And by custom made, it means it has your branding. Now, the Department of Real Estate rules on advertising say that if the open house sign has your name on it or any identification of you, it's got to have your broker's name and it has to have your DRE number. And the DRE number cannot be in the smallest font. And you also, if you're using your personal logo, you're required under DRE rules, Department of Real Estate rules, to have the company logo as well on the sign, and your logo can't be bigger than the company logo. By the way, the Department of Real Estate has actually come and measured signs. They actually, with a ruler, to see if your logo is too big or your DRE number is too small, and they fine agents sometimes as much as $2,000 because that's something they'd like to do. So having your own signs would be obviously better, right? Comply with the rules. It's got your name, it's got your branding, and people might call. Now, the signs I buy, which are special signs, maybe I could, but I like to buy the small plastic because they're light, don't scratch as easily, 2-sided small A-frame signs. The ones I buy customized from Build a Sign cost about $80 a sign, something like that. You will find if you just Google search cheap, these are called A-frame signs, cheap open house signs, cheap A-frame signs. You'll find a lot of people that could make cheap signs for you. But your choices are use the listing agent signs if the listing agent has them. Use generic signs, which you can buy at the Board of Realtors and are cheaper. Or if you're committed to doing this, make an investment and have signs that are branded with you. Your company probably has a system for ordering them. So the system, before, prepare and promote, right? So you might want to know scripts. If this is your listing, you should think about staging the house. If it's not your listing, you don't have a lot of control over some of the stuff. I have checklists. You would want to promote it. You need preparation and strategic promotion, right? Building trust, right? Qualify guests as potential buyers and sellers. Build trust with every guest at your open house. My first line, if I'm doing an open house and people come in, what I'm going to do if people come in, my first question is going to be from, say, hey, welcome, come on in. By the way, are you folks from the neighborhood or are you out looking for a home to buy? And their answer is either going to be from the neighborhood or, yeah, we're kind of out looking at homes. Now, the reason I would ask people that question to begin with is because I want to know, are these potential sellers or potential buyers, right? And that's what I would like to know. And if they're from the neighborhood and they're potential sellers, the dialogue might be different than if they're a potential buyer. If they're a potential seller, I'm going to say, well, great, come in. I bet, it's always good to check out what the other, what your neighbors have been doing. Do you have a similar model? How long have you lived here? Wow, that's a long time. I'll bet you have a lot of equity now. When do you plan on selling your home? I learned to ask that question to people. When do you plan on selling your home? Right? At first I was nervous because I thought, ooh, that's kind of a too direct of a question. Nobody ever started to cry or anything. They would say, oh, well, we don't know. We've been thinking about it, maybe at the end of the year, maybe next year, we're just, oh, right. It's a different conversation. If they say, well, we're out just looking at homes, great, come on in, take a look, right? And then there's another series of questions. Follow up with the people that were there. If you're part of EXP, you have access to something called KV Core, which is a mobile app. It works on a tablet. It works on a laptop. There's and by the way, what I take when I'm doing an open house is this is a Chromebook, right? This is what I take. And my phone has a Wi-Fi hotspot. And the Chromebook, first of all, doesn't weigh very much, doesn't take much time to boot up. It will run mobile apps, right? Including the app for people to sign into an open house. And I set that up and people can put in their information. Sometimes if you have them fill out by hand one of those things, they'll write it in such a way that you can't understand what anybody is saying. Did you bring your checkbook or do you have all cash in the trunk of your car? Thanks, Jerry. I'll add that question to my list. So then we want to follow up, and you want to be the #1 agent for that market, right? Which is really the goal, right? So preparing for an open house. Set goals, I've already mentioned that. Decide what you're going to stay, that sort of. Here's a script that you might use if you were talking to people in the neighborhood. Because this is one of my pro tips, all right? Let's say you're doing an open house. How soon is the seller going to be gone? Now, if it's vacant, this is easier because they're already gone. But let's say that you can arrange for the seller. Sometimes they'll say, well, we're going to go to the beach, or we're going to go, we're going to go do something for the day. It's all yours. And what I always, if it was my listing and I could control this, I would always hold 2 open houses. 2. The first open house is something that I would hold earlier, like noon to 1 or 11:30 to 12:30. And that's a secret open house, just for the neighbors. And I have a flyer, postcard, there's a script kind of here. And my postcard, by the way, and flyer says, are you a nosy neighbor? And that it says, I'm representing so-and-so, they're just put their home on the market. We're going to be doing open houses this weekend. You may want to see what they've done to their house. And we're having a special showing event just for the neighbors. It's from noon to 1, right? You do it at a different time, a little bit earlier. Refreshments will be served. And you should really say, the owner will not be there, right? Because otherwise they don't want the owner to know that they're looking at their house. So if you talk to your favorite title rep and you say, I'm doing an open house, can I get a list of the people that live in the neighborhood, owner occupied, right? You could go and hand out the flyer, you could mail them the postcard. If you can get phone numbers, you could call them, and this is a script. Is that like it's a special open house? That's right, for special people. Now, why would I be, and then at 1, we would do the regular open house for the muggles, right? For the buyers and the normal people. Why would we want to do it? By the way, when I was doing open houses, I had an easel, right? And a big cardboard thing, which was also something that could stand on its own because it had flaps that would fit on like a countertop or a table or something like that. And what I would do is I would set up the easel and I would tack things to it. What kinds of things would I tack? Well, if it's at noon and I'm just inviting the neighbors, that means homeowners who are potential sellers, then everything that I'm going to have on display is going to be relevant to somebody thinking about selling, most of which I get from RPR. Any packets of information that I would be giving people sort of falls into the pre-listing packet kind of a thing. What's going on in the market, where our price is going, what I can do to sell your home, stuff like that. And then let's say from noon to 1, we're doing, and you understand there's a real value when you know that the people coming in at 12:15 and 12:30 are nearby homeowners, right? You're already prepared for that, right? It's an easier script because you already know who they are. And then that part is over. At 1 o'clock, I would change what I have on the little board to now be buyer-related stuff. What kinds of buyer-related stuff you might be asking? Again, a lot of this comes from RPR, but how about school rankings? How about that? I'm going to talk about the questions that you're going to need to be able to answer. I always would build a digital folder, and by a digital folder, I would create a Google document folder. And I like Google stuff, right? But anyhow, I would do that. Why? Because Google is easy for me to access on my phone. Certainly my Chromebook likes Google folders. I could share the folder. I can find certain things. And so I would have some of the digital files, the PDFs, already in there. Items of value, by the way, would be things you could do. How about this? Here are the 5 things that renovations that you can do that will pay off when you sell your home. And here are the 5 you wish to avoid if you want to maximize your money, right? And there are a lot of these. These are called items of value. I have a lead sheet, which, and by the way, I used to just create a Google form sometimes for signing people in. I wasn't using KV Core, and it would ask them some questions, and people could type on that, and I would have stuff, right? And so the lead sheet has questions. So set your goals. How often do you want to do it? Right? It's good to have a goal, right? And you could say, well, my goal is to generate so many leads from it, but until you get into a rhythm of doing this, you really don't know, right? You really don't know. You should, if you can be picky, you should look for something that's in a high traffic area. Ask, does it have any special features? Is it in a desirable neighborhood? And this is important. Preview other agents' listings. I guess I'm editing this as I'm going along. Preview other agents' listings. So if I'm a buyer and I'm interested in buying a house in a particular neighborhood and I go to your open house, first of all, is it likely that there are other open houses in the neighborhood? Do you think that's likely? Probably. Is it also likely that, assuming the properties are similarly priced and similar homes, that buyer might go to those other open houses as well? Probably. In fact, is it possible they've already been to 1 or 2 before they came to your open house? Yeah. Now, what'll happen, I've had this happen to me, is they'll say, well, hey, have you seen, the one over on such and such street on Paprika? Did you see that house? And you're like, no, there's really? Where's that? Oh, really? It's in the neighborhood. No, I didn't know about that. No, I haven't seen it. You understand, it doesn't look like you're the area specialist. So if you really want to do a good open house, what you're going to want to do is preview what you would do either that morning or during the week, the other listings, whether there's an open house or not in the neighborhood. Because when you're able to talk to people about other properties that are in the neighborhood, there are 3 reasons why a buyer might want to work with you. 3 reasons. 1 is because you have superior knowledge about what's happening in the real estate market in terms of properties that are for sale and what would be a good purchase for a buyer. And that's because you know the market and you're previewing homes and you're paying attention. That's reason number 1. Now, some of you might be saying, well, that doesn't really describe me. right? Because, you know, I don't preview homes and I don't go on broker tours and look at homes and I don't know what the other homes are selling for. All right, so you could learn, but let's say, or number two, what's another reason? Let's say you are so good at the different financing options, right? You know what the special loans that the credit union has, that banks have, that mortgage companies have, and you really understand all the different loan options so that when you're having a discussion with somebody about financing options, you impress them with your knowledge of the different kinds of loans and lenders. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, you know, that doesn't sound like me either. Right, you know, I don't know anything about loans, you know, I just have my loan agent there. And by the way, having a loan agent with you is not a bad idea, right? Just because that's another reason. But that's going to help the loan agent more than you. So what else? What's another reason? Right? I said there were three. Hopefully the third one is some. The third one is what I call how to get the best deal, how to get a good buy. And we're going to talk about that script. But, and I'll go through the questions that I normally ask. Preview other agents' listings. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on staging, and I have a checklist and things like that. But you only have a few minutes, depending on how busy you are, to talk to people when they walk in. And I have lists of these questions, and I have a lot of videos on this. I always ask the same questions, right? The first question, I have 8 questions, but the first question doesn't count. Somebody walks in, first question is, are you from the neighborhood or are you out looking for a home to buy? They answer me, right? Well, we're not sure if we want to buy, but we're all right. So they're not a neighbor, right? Come on in, welcome, take a look around, You could say the owner has asked me to, you could sign in, but sometimes and as they're walking around, I would ask them some questions. Question number 1. What is it about this home that caught your attention? What kind of home are you looking for? That's sort of the question. And they might answer it whatever they say, well, we have a bunch of dogs, and so we're looking for a home with a built-in dog kennel, and in Zillow, this says that it's got a dog kennel. And so, yeah, that's why we wanted to come and see the house, right? They don't often say that, but you get the idea. This is in the area we're looking for a home like this, that sort of thing, right? So question number 1, what kind of home have you been looking for? Right? What kind of home? Number 2, how long have you been looking? How long have you been looking for a home with a dog kennel, as an example? And they're going to tell you, I don't know, we just got started, we've been looking for a couple of months. Great, that's wonderful. How many homes have you, dog kennels, have you actually seen? And they give us an answer. Now, if somebody says 20, 30, there's another question coming up that's going to be important. All right, so number 1, what kind of home are you looking for? Number 2, how long have you been looking? Number 3, how many homes have you actually seen? And then number 4, assuming that number isn't, this is our first one, right? If they said, well, yeah, we've probably looked at 10 or 20 homes. Why haven't you bought one? Why didn't you buy one of those? Why haven't you bought one? Now, the answer to that question is important, because if the buyer does not have any issues with the way they're finding a home, then we don't have any solutions. No problem, no need for a solution. But they're going to say things like, well, we haven't found the one we wanted yet, or when we do find one, somebody's already bought it. If it's a good deal, we don't know, right? So the next question is, have you had a chance to talk to a lender and get pre-approved? Have you done that? And if they say, no, not yet, we've just gotten started, well, you might need to start with that, because in order to even be treated seriously, in order to even present an offer, we need to know that the seller's not going to take their home off the market. They're not going to accept an offer unless you can prove that you can buy the house. And it'll save you a lot of money if you're pre-approved. If you're not pre-approved, there's a good chance you're not going to be able to buy a house. But if you are pre-approved, you have a better negotiating position than somebody who is not. All right, so what are the questions? What kind of home are you looking for? How long have you been looking for a home? How many have you seen? Why haven't you bought one of those? And then number 5 is, have you talked to a loan agent yet? Now, whether I do the loan agent or the next one in order, I don't know. After those first 4, I vary because I get bored. The next question is, are you working with an agent yet? Notice I didn't say just, are you working with an agent? I said, are you working with an agent yet? Now, they might say yes, no, or we're working with several. And by the way, working with several is, well, kind of a no. Right? So the questions, what kind of house are you looking for? How long have you been looking? How many homes have you seen? Why haven't you bought one of those? Are you working with an agent yet? Now notice I'm not arguing or engaging them necessarily. I'm just asking these questions. Have you had a chance to talk to a lender and find out based upon your income and the amount of cash you have available, exactly how much home you can afford to buy, right? So we're up to 6. Number 7, do you currently own or do you rent? Do you currently own or do you rent? Now, if they say we own, yay, we own a property, yeah, we own a house, then my follow-up question is going to be, are you going to need to sell that house in order to buy another house? Some people say no. I sold a $4 million house to somebody who did not have to sell his house in order to buy that house. Does that sound nice? Right? So many people are going to say, well, yeah, we're going to need to sell that one too. Would you be interested in getting an estimate of what your home is likely to sell for in today's market and how much cash you're going to walk away with? Would that be useful to you? And if they say, well, yeah, I guess we should. Now you're saying this is what's called a listing appointment, right? At that point, if they say, well, we rent, great, our fixed term lease, when is your lease up, right? Because if they're, we understand, we would like to know that. So now we're up to 7 questions, right? Question number 1, what kind of home have you been looking for? Number 2, how many homes have you seen? Number 3, why didn't you buy one of those? Number 4, are you working with an agent yet? Number 5, have you talked to a lender? Number 6, did I leave off one? The number 6, do you currently rent or do you own? I guess I left one out. Did I leave one out? How many homes? I can't believe. I've only said this a few million times. What kind of home are you looking for? How long have you been looking? How many have you seen? Yeah, that's the question. How many have you seen? Why haven't you bought one yet? Are you working with an agent yet? Have you talked to a lender? Do you currently rent or do you own? So that's 7. And remember, I promised 8. Question number 8. Has anyone showed you the best strategy for getting a good deal when buying a home in a market like we're in today? Have you ever really had that, like a strategy session? I mean, in the way the market is even today, to get a good house requires a strategy, but to get a good house and to negotiate a good deal, that might require a good strategy. Has anyone ever shared with you what that strategy might look like? And if they say, well, no, not really, well, would you be interested in hearing about a strategy that would help you get the best house for the least amount of money? Would that be something that would be interesting to you? And if they say, well, yeah, we would be interested in talking about it, that's when we're going for an appointment. Right, well, this wouldn't take very long. We could do it and then go look at homes, right? And so why don't we meet, Saturday morning, and I could explain the strategy. You're closing for an appointment. And so now I'm back to, well, what would be the best time for you? Is it during the week or weekends? They say weekends. Great. Is it Saturday or Sunday? They say Saturday. Great. Is it morning or afternoon? They say morning. Great. Is it early, middle, late morning? Right. You understand, I'm asking the questions in such a way as to not get a no. Right. Because if I say to them, how about 11:30 Saturday? They might say no. Right. But if I've already asked these series of questions, I'm much less likely to get no. That's the third reason why somebody might work with you, because you've got a strategy. Now, some of you are going to say, well, what is that strategy? Well, I've made videos on that too. Call me, right? If you're on the call me. Prepare and be the neighborhood expert. People, if it's a condominium or a townhouse complex, you should expect they're going to ask you how many units are in the complex. If you say, oh, really, I don't know, it's like a lot, right? They kind of expect you to know that. Number two, they're going to say, so what schools? What's the elementary school? You're like, I don't know, I guess there's probably one, not too, I don't know. So you understand, you're not coming across as the neighborhood expert, right? You ought to know what the schools are. You ought to know how many units. So when I first was, for one of the first open houses I ever did, I was behind, I was late. I know it's hard to imagine, right? And I was rushing to put up signs, and when I showed up at the house, I was late, and there was people standing. People will be early if you're late, right? And there are people standing there waiting for me to open up the door. And so we're walking in, and the buyer said, so how many bedrooms does this house have? And I said, 3. And I'm walking around, here's bedroom number 1, 2, 3. Oh, I guess there's a bonus bedroom. There were 4. I didn't even know the number of bedrooms the house has. So before you go there, you're going to want to know what's going on with that house. What is the square footage? How many bedrooms does it have? When was it built? What's any you're going to want to know this stuff. Have they done any inspections and reports? Is there a termite inspection, a property inspection? Now, I would give copies to people only if they don't have an agent and they're interested in working with me. I would email them, and I actually had a little Google form where they could put it in, and it would send them a link to the inspections and reports. So if they have an agent and they're not willing to, change agents, then, and it's not your listing, then I don't do a lot of administrative work, right? But you're going to want to know all that. You're going to want to know what other homes have sold for. Community information stuff. These are all things that you could put together and give them. And by the way, your preferred loan agent probably has software that if you tell them in advance what the open house is and what the listing price is, they can prepare a flyer with financing options, right? But if you're not good at financing, having a loan agent there might be better. Sellers, which might come by, want to know what's going on in the market, that sort of stuff. Refinancing, not as much. There's some safety tips. One of the other reasons for doing an open house with a loan agent is that there's 2 adults there, sometimes adults, right? With licenses and things like that. Sometimes it's better to have someone else with you, particularly, anyhow, I'm just saying. All right. Door knocking, not going to spend a lot of time on that. And sphere of influence, this is just things you could do to market it. I'm going to show you a couple things before we go on. Tips for signs. There's just a lot of stuff here. But signs, how many signs do you need? It depends on the open house. Signage was more important in the old days because before GPS was built into Zillow. Many of the people that are going to open houses have Zillow or Redfin, and they have the open houses, and there's a button they can click and it gives them directions. But you need to have a sign in front of the house that says, here's the open house. You should have a sign at maybe a couple of the other streets. You need to look at a map in advance and plan out where's the busiest street in the neighborhood, and it would be better to have signs starting there going to your open house. I guess I could do a lot more than one class on this. Let me show you what, I'm going to give you an example. All right. So let's say I was doing an open house on 17007 Heatherwood Way, Morgan Hillbilly in California, right? And so here's a listing. Now, one of the things that I need is, what about a flyer, an open house flyer, right? What about an open house flyer? Now, what my recommendation is, I like to use RPR, and at the end of the outline, you're going to see I have some links to some specific RPR articles and about how to use RPR. But here's the property, right? Heatherwood Way. Now, one of the things, if I was in a hurry and I was doing the open house and I didn't have, it would be better for you to run a CMA. But what I would do if I didn't have time to run a CMA and look at everything, you know, like if I were listing the home, what would I say it would sell for? Notice the realtor's valuation model is $2,091,570. If I click on view details, and sometimes I've just printed this out. Right? Oh, this one's right off of done, that's why. And it gives me a summary. It gives me the one property that actually closed, that went through the MLS. And these other properties are off-market listings, some of which are good comps and some aren't. We'd be looking for something built at the same time. And the reason that I would look at these is that I would like to be able to say when I'm chatting with somebody, well, you know, the one over on Heatherwood Way, it didn't go through the multiple listing service, but they got almost 2,000,01947, something like that, 600. And it was a little bit bigger. It was a 5.4, not the 4.4, but the square. Did you understand? I know then by looking at this what some of the off-market listings have sold for. And this doesn't take very much time. All I have to do is just, guess I didn't want to do that. All I have to do is just look at the details, but I would run a CMA so that you know. Let's talk about open house flyer, right? Because people are saying, I don't know, I need to make a flyer. I don't know how to make a flyer. So the easiest way to make an open house flyer is when we're looking at it is you go to create report. See that? And the report we want to create is called a property flyer. How about that? Now we get one picture, right? The first picture looks fine to me, but in this takes a minute to make, right? Here are all, wow, there's a lot of nice pictures. We have to have a headline. Open house. And you could add more things. It shows that all the text isn't going to end, but that's fine with me. Do I want to now tax amount? I don't really need that. Subdivision, it really doesn't know. Some of this stuff it doesn't know, but we'll see if it knows the school district. And this is, you know, other things, that, but we're just using the default right now. And if we go and we click on run report and we click on display now, what you're going to see in a very short period of time, it's going to make a flyer, right? 2 minutes. Now, if you're with EXP and the listing is an EXP listing, and you go, and if you're not with EXP, call me because we could fix that. But if your company probably has software that does something like this, and some of it we can import and some of it we can't. And what you'll notice, there's an MLS lookup, and you put in the MLS number and you click on search, and here's the listing, right? It found the listing. It only works on EXP listings if you're at EXP. And then what that's going to do is it's going to pull in some of the information, not perfect, right? But it's got bedrooms and baths, and we could add things, right? We could add stuff there. It picked pictures that it just picked some pictures. You could change them if you felt like it. You have to put in your picture. You have to put in your DRE number. You have to fix it a little bit, but it makes a reasonable flyer. All those pictures and things, it just imported. And we could say, well, we want a different picture. And if you click on it, it's going to give you the opportunity to pick a different picture, right? And it's going to take a minute. So maybe I'm not going to do that right now. Maybe I won't. But you get the idea. You might want to look at that. Now, what does our report look like? Here is our flyer, right? Didn't take very long. Active, price, address, open house, map, picture, description, me, stuff, right, about the property. I could print it out. How long did that take? Not very long. So the other thing you're going to want to do is when you go in your digital file, or if you want to bring your digital folder, you're also going to want to have an agent full display, because you're going to want to read all this stuff, right? The secret stuff, right, that they've got here. If there's a disclosure link, you're going to want to download the disclosures. You're going to want to look at them. People are going to ask you, is there a termite report? You're going to need to know if the answer is yes or no. If the answer is yes, oh, how much section 1 is, you're going to need to know that, right? So the more you know about what's going on in the area and what properties are selling for, and you've looked at them, and the more you know about this property, the better chance you have of building rapport with the buyer, because they think that you know something. Oh my God, right? They think you do. Anyhow, what else did I put in here? I put in a lot of stuff. Maybe that's, I don't know, internet. And if you, I have lots of checklists and things to do during and before and all that other kind of stuff. At the end, I'm making sort of a plea. I have some of the tour questions. I have some of my own questions, which I went through. I've got a lot of stuff about this, let's just say. I've got a, and by the way, I actually do this. I said, I ask people, do you want to buy the house? Hey, so what do you think? Do you want to buy the house? I've had people sometimes say, yeah, as a matter of fact, I think we're going to buy the house. And then at the end of my, and I have basic open house scripts, you know, which are just about the same. Here are very similar questions to the ones I've asked, but you can come up with your own list if you like them better. But you ought to be getting smooth at this, talking to people, chatting with people, asking them questions. Things to say after, more scripts, follow-up scripts, and afterwards, you put them in the database. People, there's a transition, there's a continuum that people go through when they're thinking about buying a home, and then they move a little, they're doing research, and then there's a certain point where they're going out and looking at homes, but it still might be 6 months to 2 years before they buy a home. You want to put them in your database. You want to be able to follow up. And at the end, more about the market, and you ought to be spending time every week finding things to, people to buy, sell, or invest in real estate. At the very end, and because I've gone on a little long, for those of you that have access to KV Core, I have links to videos on how to use the app and how to use the system. You might want to check out some of the open house and RPR guides. And by the way, I always have the RPR app on my phone. I also would have zip forms on your phone. I would be in a position to write an offer if somebody wanted to buy a house. Can we download your list, please? All of the questions that I asked are, I've done that. Can we share this document? Why don't I've already given everyone a copy because I printed, I gave everybody a copy. It's a PDF, but it's there. And for those of you that would like, where is the chat? Chat. Attendees, handout, chat. All right. But if you want the copy of the document itself, you'll find all the questions that I asked are all contained in the scripts, right? And there's a couple of extra ones. Mine, even though I flubbed it once there, mine are sort of ingrained in my head, right? I don't have to study or practice or do any of that kind of stuff because I've asked these questions over and over and over again. And sometimes nobody shows up at the open house, and sometimes sellers show up. And I'll tell you one story, and then we'll end this. So I have a person from the company wants an open house in Willow Glen, right? And there's a guy that I worked with that was farming Willow Glen. But the issue was this house had gone pending contingent, and the contingencies hadn't been removed, and so the seller wanted an open house anyhow, right? And so I told the guy that was farming the area, do you want to do an open house? And he said, I told him it was pending, and he said, no, I'll do something else. So I asked another guy, a go-getter, all right, who said, absolutely, whatever, thank you very much for the opportunity. The guy always dresses really professionally. He shows up early, he puts up his signs, he does everything, right? He's there. two people come to the open house, right? One of them is another agent. The other one was just somebody, that he tried to, but they had an agent and they weren't interested. And so the open house is over. It's 4 o'clock. He's packing up to leave and he sees this couple walking down the driveway towards the house. And rather than saying, hey, it's 4 o'clock, and by the way, a lot of times people come at the end, right? But anyhow, he just said, rather than saying, oh, it's 4 o'clock, the open house is over, he said, hey, we were scheduled till 4 o'clock, but good to see you. Come on in. I got plenty of time. I'll show you the whole house. And the couple said, no, we've already seen the house. All right. We're neighbors and we would like to sell our house. And so we thought we'd come by and see if you could help us with that. That was his first listing. Now, and I told, just because I'm cruel, the guy that was working the area, farming it, that the open house that he turned down produced a listing in his farm, which now is going to have somebody else's name on it. Right. I've had, don't leave early. I believe me, I'm not saying I never have, right? I'm being honest. I'm not saying I never have. But what happens is a lot of people come at the end. And I've been to open houses where there was nothing going on and nothing was going on. And then you should expect to spend at least another 30 minutes at the open house, right? Because a lot of times the people come at the end. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed that. We're having a very special presentation next week. You're gonna all get invited. It's not going to be me, that's the good news, but there is I don't know if his name is Fred Mack. I don't know if you've ever heard. Oh, Fred E. Mack. Maybe some of you have heard of Freddie Mac. A spokesman from Freddie Mac is going to be talking to all of us next Thursday about what's really going on in the real estate market and what's coming up. I'm not kidding. I've got Mr. Mac's representative coming to talk next week. Don't miss it. Thanks a lot, guys. Always good talking to you. Any questions, reach out to me. Have a good day. Bye.